All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the interview series with top investors. I'm sitting here today with Naji. He's an investment associate at Techstars Silicon Valley, and I'm super stoked to have you.
Thank you. It's really great to be here. Yeah, no, Melanie, I always enjoy talking to you. And so yeah, a little bit about me, if it's relevant. Was a operator turned investor. I have also worked for a while, kind of ghostwriting or serving as a consultant for a bunch of different startups, doing capital raising. Co-founded my own energy startup, designing batteries for off-grid and bad grid telecom systems. Um, and yeah, super passionate about impact and happy to be here and chat with you.
Yeah, super stoked. I think something that would be really interesting to hear is accelerators invest at the earliest stages. What do you look for as an accelerator that might be different from a traditional pre-seed VC?
It's a great question. I think a lot of the things are fairly similar. Like we're all looking for like great founders. And we mean that like externally from the business, like even if the business is bad or we don't really like it, everyone's looking for really great founders. I think the one piece that we're probably looking for a little bit more hard at Techstars is also a level of like humility. We like
Mm,
people to be really, really coachable in the sense that they can receive information from a wide group and network that we have and iterate and implement these things in their business. And do it with like a lack of ego because we also want these people to be just really solid people who are willing to, you've probably heard our motto, give first. So I would say the biggest thing is like coachability, um, resiliency, and then I think one maybe unique thing about Techstars that we're like really really passionate about, and maybe this is just like our program. I can't really speak for the global network, but the we index very heavily on people who really want to understand their customer well. We want people in our program that are really, really passionate about helping their customers make progress. And that comes, we can dig into that a little bit further, but that's kind of, I would say that's the high level perspective.
totally. I mean, I think especially if you're a first-time founder, the ability to iterate and continue to iterate in like you don't know what you don't know, and as you try to find product market fit, you're going to have to listen to other folks who have done it before you, and also figure out when to not listen to folks who have done it before you. So that coachability is a huge piece. I mean, I see it in myself where something's not working, and I'm like, oh, I really wish it was. But to make it work, you have to just pivot, right? So that's amazing. I'm curious, do you see any common mistakes in the applications that founders put in for Techstars that could be avoided?
um, I don't know if I would call them like mistakes because I think I think to some degree there it's intentional, but I think a big piece that don't ne- people don't always show their work. And that's I'll dig into that because that's like a
Okay.
weird thing to say. You probably heard that in like third grade math class, but that's like exactly what I'm thinking about because I myself was that student. It was like I know how to do my multiplication, I know how to do my division. You don't need to. I don't need to draw this out for you when you give me a more complex problem, right? So like when we got to algebra, it was like I would just write the answer, and people were like, "You
Yeah.
didn't explain how you got there." And I think for a lot of times, some of the applications that I see are just like, they come across as very like, this is a problem, period. They're just like, this is a problem and I know it's a problem. And you're like,
Yeah.
well, how do you know it's a problem? And like, have you quantified that? Have you talked to customers and actually gotten that insight? Like, how are you validating these ideas and thoughts? And that goes into not just like how you're lining up your business model, your go to market strategy, customer acquisition strategy. It also speaks to like the way, like it speaks very much so to like how you're like how you're explaining the entire business and idea,
Yep.
as well as like your thoroughness of the research. And I think a lot of people miss out on an opportunity to like share a lot of those details. The other thing I would say, and you can take this with a grain of salt, but I think sometimes people aren't as like vulnerable because they like don't want to share as many of like the challenges with the business that they're facing. And I think it's because of fear that like they won't get selected. They're like, if I tell you these holes or these problems in my business, you know, you're going to think I'm not a good business. But in reality, what that really tells us or shows us most of the time is that one, you're just thinking intellectually about your business and you're actually trusting us and giving us insight into how we can actually help you. Did I just get like a...
You did. I think it's your iPhone. That was awesome.
Okay. Okay. Anyway, that would be my response.
100%. I mean, one of the things that I lead with when I work with founders is you don't need to hammer home on your team. Like, you don't need to just drill them that you graduated from Stanford, top of your class. What's important, I mean, of course, explain that. The way that you're validating yourself as a founder is through your thought process as you're taking the investor through what you're building. And also leaning into you being the industry expert and leveraging the dollar signs and statistics that you've researched and learned to validate how you got here and what you do. But I see a lot of founders, they're like, I don't have the perfect team. I'm not, I don't have a specific background. But from my experience, investors look more for like the proof, right? Writing it out. How did you get here? Because they're investing in the founder and their thought process rather than their background.
Exactly.
I'm curious, this is a really tough market, which I'm sure everybody knows. Do you think it's easier for people to raise right now when they have minimal traction to show compared to people who might have, I don't know, maybe they have some amount of revenue coming in the door, a little bit of traction, validation? What are your thoughts? Because I'm kind of seeing that less proof in the pudding at the idea stage is actually getting a little bit more investment than later on, but curious to know.
That's interesting you say that. We were having like a deeper conversation about this as well with some of our founders and in talking about like fundraising, especially at like an earlier stage. I think in today's economic like climate or like macroeconomic climate, the fundraising is just harder all across the board. Yeah. It's harder than it was like 2 years ago, point blank period. Doesn't matter what kind of idea you have, but I will say that at like the earlier stages, how you measure traction can actually be quite interesting. And I think the smart investors who are really getting in on some of these really like some of the best deals are not only indexing on just like, do you have revenue? Like revenue is great because it's an indicator that you'll be able to return some level of money. It also can signal repeatability, but it's in and of itself, it's not the only thing. It's not like a checkbox situation. And so like to your point, I think you're coming across like these ideas that maybe they're not making revenue yet, but they're really great ideas. And to what I was saying earlier about the kinds of businesses that we're looking for, when you really understand your customers' pain points and needs and how to make progress, even if you're not making money yet, it's something that tells us like you're going to get to making money once you fully understand the problem. So an example would be like a company who has a great idea, needs some capital, to finish building out like a product that they can share with their customers and really draw them in just on the product alone and stop like band-aiding a beta together or something like that. And those are some of like the more exciting deals because it's like what you're saying is like, yeah, I created a Facebook group where I just provide financial advice to these communities but I have thousands of people super engaged into this. So many of them have already indicated that they're willing to pay $4 a month for this kind of conversation or service or these added factors. And now I know what they're doing. I haven't built my I haven't built my product yet, which is like the actual financial advisory. And this is like just a random example, but like to that point, it's like once you do, and with that $100,000 that you got as like a capital infusion to build out what you're trying to build out, now we know, okay, this person has been really thoughtful, has proven out this market over here. They've shown me a customer acquisition strategy. They've shown me the go to market. And now it's a matter of just like getting this into the market and iterating. And I know that they're going to make money from that. And I also really love how resilient and like strong the founder is. Yeah, I want to invest in that over the person who's maybe, made a little bit of money, but it's really unclear to them and everyone else, like why people are really using or hiring their product or service to do a job.
Yeah, 100%. I'm curious. So, companies go through Techstars, they get to demo day. How, and I have my thoughts on this, but I want to know yours. How do founders evaluate investor fit from their perspective?
Oh, so funny. This is actually kind of the conversation I just gave yesterday to our founders, and I could show you the presentation. But I was teaching them about a lot of different things of like how to evaluate an investor, a potential investor, and a lot of those things. If you really want to like get into the weeds, it's about like the bottom line is about being able to do venture math and understanding the game that you're playing. Because to be honest with you, and I think the statistic is something like 99% of businesses are not venture backable. So you should like really think hard if you should even be playing that game, for one.
Yeah.
But two, in terms of like when you start looking at investors, I think one, you're definitely investing in the people. You're indexing on the people. Again, like going back, like the relationship analogy of like, these early stage investors are going to be with you for a while. It's very likely that they're the people that you're going to want to call first when things are going right. And they're also, if they're like your lead investor at this like early stage too, they're hopefully going to be the people that are introducing you to follow on investors and things like that. So I think the things to look for, and what we were harping on before, like you want to look at their fund size. You want to know, do they write checks at your stage? Does it make sense? You want to look at what's their target ownership? Are they more operators or are they more capital allocators? Do they actually want to help you and serve as a mechanic in your business, or are they just like, here's the capital, run with it. This is just like a bet. I would lean more towards the former because I think those are actually more beneficial and strategic. Other things to look for, I mean, talk to other founders, get to know who this investor is and get to know what they're all about. Do they actually provide the value that they're claiming? Do they have access to the networks that you need to reach? Do they actually have people like good funds that follow on invest into their deal flow? Super important, especially if you're looking to raise more money as the business grows. I think what was another thing? Obviously, there's other stuff like geography, making sure that they invest in like what their thesis is, and then I think the biggest piece, and I kind of said it already, but it's just really hitting home at like who are they as a person and what are they passionate about. And I think so. In my experience, having like helped a bunch of founders like fundraise, and a lot of which, some of it was just like cold emails and things like that. I think the biggest, like the most intriguing piece of that was like sometimes being able to find out so much about someone that I almost like knew that they were going to respond to me because of how detailed I was or how particular I was at hitting home at like, this is your passion and I know that you're really excited about it. And so I know you're going to be really excited about this. Yeah.
Super important. I think when I work with pre-seed companies, a lot of them come to me and they're like, I got to fundraise and I have to fundraise now. It's like, okay, hold on, pause. First of all, what are you building something VC scale? generally they have pieces of it, but they don't have all of it. And so they want to go speak to investors, but they're almost like wasting these connections because they just want the introductions, they want the pitch deck. But before that even happens, it's like, what's the basic infrastructure of your company? And is it VC investable? And also, do you want it to be VC scale? Like, there's just kind of this sit down of what do you want? What are your passions? Where do you want this to go? Because that's how you find alignment with people. This entire industry, startup, investor, it's all relationship building. So I love that piece about really finding out what makes people super excited, because that's what's going to get them investing anyways. I actually have a question about, what are your thoughts on what makes a company VC scale? In my mind, it's like they have to hit, I have them almost work backwards. Like, okay, if you're infused with the capital, as much capital as you could need, how would this business grow? To what ARR? And almost working backwards from there, like what would the steps be to get there? Because a lot of the times they say it's like, I can hit 15 million, but it's actually much bigger than that. They just don't see that possibility. So I'm curious, what do you think is VC scale, and how do they incorporate that at the very earliest stages?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think, to your point, there is some level of like doing the math backwards. I think when we talk about VC scale in just like a raw and like financial by a raw financial definition, going back to what I was talking about, like looking at the fund size, right? So
Yeah.
if you are $100 million fund, let's use 100 for simplicity. You're $100 million fund. You probably write checks of at least like 1 million, something like that. And you have an ownership target. Again, to just keep the math simple, you're looking for 10% of the company. So when you're investing, you're basically saying that, one, every investment that you make, the venture model, every investment that you make is going to return the fund. So that means that each business needs to return to you as an investor $100 million. So what that means is, if your target ownership is only 10%, that means the companies need to get to a valuation of $1 billion. Easy math, right? So when you're thinking at like the earlier stages, and these people, so for one, you're probably not talking at like a super early pre-seed. You're maybe not talking to $100 million fund. You're probably talking to like a $50 million fund, maybe a $25 million fund, depending. But so maybe the math gets a little bit easier, but that also means the check sizes usually get smaller. But basically like venture backability, at least from a numerical perspective in my mind, is like these companies need to reach at least $1 billion in valuation, if not more. So some of these other funds, like $1 billion is nothing. They're hoping that these companies reach $100 billion, because they're like, I need to return my fund, and my fund is $1 billion. So in terms of that side of things, I think it's pretty like, this is it. Like, it's a very like isolated, just like single point of like, this is where you need to go. And otherwise it's not really fitting this model. But at the earlier stages, like you said, I think it's like hard and challenging to tell that up front, because you're just like, I'm starting from zero. So like, what are you talking about? Getting to like $1 billion, like, or $100 million in ARR. Like, that's crazy. Like, you're just like, that's so wild. But I think at the early stages, the story needs to be that like, what gets exciting, I think, for venture backability is like the trajectory. And so they want to see that you are building a good business in a market that is large enough to get to that really large number, and your business right now is scaling very quickly. And again, you understand your customers so well that you can help more and more people make progress rapidly. And so then it gets more into, I think most investors realize that like getting to that 100 million number in ARR, right, is going to be a challenge, and it's going to take time. So they can't like expect you to know how to do that immediately. But if you can show the repeatability of your process and show like, look, if this is ultimately a machine, right? If you can show, if my input is 3 and I get 10 out, perfect. Let's do that more. Let me give you some money so you can do it faster, so that in 5 years, you know, when you've got 100 going in, you're getting out, now you're getting out 300, you know, or you're getting out 400, 500. And so they want to see like the repeatability that like, no matter what I give you, you're going to be able to like exponentially make this larger. And so and it has to be in a market that there's enough space to do that, because you could get really big in a small market and you'll never get to that number. So it has to be like a large market, and you have to show the the repeatability of the business and your ability to get to a sizable number that's enough to return their fund. Sorry 100%. If that was convoluted.
No, it was great. Yes, it's fantastic. I think people forget what VCs are, that they literally have to go through the same process as you. They have to go raise money, except way more. And they're banking on 1 to 2 investments to return their entire fund. But what they're looking for is for every single one of those to potentially do that. So keeping that in mind as they go for it. And if they don't want to if that's not what they want, going for something different. I mean, being a founder is so emotionally, physically, spiritually taxing. There are other ways to be successful. And this is like one really small asset class that can help you get there, but it's super, super specific. So exactly. I appreciate that. Exactly. Okay, let me see if I can do one more question before we finish up here. Let's talk about securing the warm intro for investors. This is what I work with founders a lot on. And my methodology is you can go and meet tons of investors at events. It's awesome to be in some of these huge tech hubs like San Francisco, New York. But I really think maximizing your founder network and figuring out who has raised in the last 3 years, building relationships with these founders that have successfully raised, figuring out a way to somehow give back to them, and then asking them to open up their network to you is the best way that I've seen founders successfully go get these warm introductions that actually mean something and go somewhere. But curious to hear your more in-depth thoughts.
No, I love that. I think that is a really profound way of going about it. Like it is more of that like give first model of like, if I give, someone's probably going to return, and I think it makes a ton of sense. Like you're adding value to all these other businesses. Eventually someone's going to see that value and go, hey, yeah, like I want to add value to you too, you know?
Yeah.
It's almost like a in-kind angel investment, you know? I think in terms of like securing warm intros, I think on a more strategic level, like there's other ways to go about it as well, but all of them are, again, like engaging your network. So I often find that like, if you, going back to like my experience with like the cold stuff, if you're trying to get to these investors and they may be like a challenge and difficult to reach, to your point, like go and try and get connected with the founders. Go and try and talk to the people who they talk to. Because you can go and reach out to someone, and as long as you're really hitting, in my mind, right, this is maybe just my personal opinion and the experiences that I've had, but when I go and approach someone with a very direct ask, and I do it in a very kind way and show that I know enough about the information that it won't be a waste of their time, and it's something that's going to be valuable. It could be a valuable conversation to them, but I'm really asking just for like feedback. Typically speaking, I get those conversations almost always, like random cold LinkedIn connection requests, Twitter DMs, like all of that good stuff. When I have like a very discreet thing to ask and it's not a huge lift, like going and saying to a VC or a founder and being like, hey, I just want to chat. They're like, I
About
don't
what?
have time to even figure out what that means.
Yeah,
Like, so if you're saying like, hey, I'm working on this XYZ problem, I saw you have experience with, minute like streamlining customer acquisition calls or recruiting clients. I would love your feedback on my process. People are like, yeah, I'm happy to talk to you about that. That takes like
yeah.
15 minutes. I have tons of experience in it. I can give you that context. And hopefully you take that time then and can make an impact. And so that they're like, oh, wow, this is actually really interesting. Let me, I would be more than, the thing that usually comes of that is like, they're like, wow, this is really interesting. I maybe want to follow up. I have someone you might want to talk to about this. And potentially that's the, oh, hey, actually, oh, you're looking for investment? I know someone who could really be interested in this. Let me get you over to them. Like, I think when you go into these conversations a little bit more innocently and try to get something else out, I think the common saying is like, ask for money, get advice, ask for advice, get money. And so it's like, I think you have to go into it with a little less expectation, and you're more likely to get those warm intros. It's just about treating people like people. Honestly, they're not banks, even though that's kind of what they do. They're not banks.
Totally. And I mean, a lot of those conversations too that I remind founders about is one founder conversation could lead to 10 intros, or it could lead to maybe they know 5 other founders in their network that could be huge distribution partners. Who knows? Like, maximizing and creating relationships with these people where you're not just taking, you're also giving, which is it's like Techstars motto, is huge. Like that's how the whole world works here. So I really appreciate it. I know I said one more question last time, but I want to touch on something that Naji and I talked about right before this started. As a woman going into these conversations,
Can I piggyback off of something you said though? Just out of
please.
curiosity. I don't want to cut
Yeah,
you off,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
I think one of the things that you said that was like interesting about like going and just being open to like the potentiality of opportunities. I think that's spot on, and it's really well, in the presentation that I gave about like the different kinds of capital you could access. It's like people always talk about like venture capital, family offices, institutional investors, like all of that good stuff, maybe grants sometimes. But the piece that I think you really hit on is like the primary way that your company should be raising capital is through customers. And so when you have those conversations, you need to be thinking about it more holistically of like, I'm raising capital, yes. All of these are different sources of capital. If me getting a solid partnership that locks in more customers, that was worth it, even if it wasn't an investor conversation, even if they weren't a VC. And so I just wanted to kind of like dig into that because I think it was actually a really profound thing to acknowledge.
Thank you.
Anyway.
Excellent. No, that's great. Yeah, definitely. Network and distribution. I think I just got off a call with one of the Techstars founders, and I was like, if you can hone in on network, distribution, and access and really leverage those 3, that's how you grow and scale as a startup. So I think I started my last statement as a woman, I've walked into many conversations, not necessarily asking investment from VCs, but just feeling the intensity and the almost like how demeaning it can be to show up and be discredited, honestly, literally just because you're a woman. And I would hope that it has lessened over the years now that we're in 2023, but I think in a lot of ways it has not, especially in a male-dominated industry. So I'm curious, do you have any advice to give female entrepreneurs who are going into these really hard conversations that are hard regardless, but they might be more discredited than their male counterparts?
Yeah, so I'll start with saying like I don't think I'm like the premier authority, so I would definitely encourage some other people to voice their opinion. I like my perspective comes more from like being like a black male in society in general and being like consistently like overlooked or people assume different things until I guess I open my mouth and speak very educatedly, and then they're like, whoa, you're actually maybe really, really smart. But I think I hate to say this because I feel like it diminishes the experience a little bit, and in some ways is like ignoring the real problem. But I think if you're really trying to like navigate these situations well, you kind of have to. I think you kind of need to, one, like, and give me a second to get to the next point too. But it's like, one, I think like remove the sometimes that like chip on the shoulder of like, like I've seen this so many times play out that like I know what it feels like, and I know what this person is doing, and I know that it's wrong. But you almost have to like be like, you know what? I can watch them do this, but I'm not going to react. I'm not going to give them this like thing that they're looking for. And instead, I'm going to do what I need to do really, really well, and I'm not going to take any of their shit. Sorry if I'm not supposed to curse, but okay. But it's like I think there's that secondary factor of like you have that respect for yourself, so you need to like make it clear that like you have respect for yourself, you're going to treat them with respect, and they need to treat you with respect. And so like I know like, and maybe this is like a little bit more anecdotal, but like there's times when like like people will like say certain things, and like they're making like they think they're making like a lighthearted joke, and they're just like teasing you, but it's about something that's like kind of inappropriate, or you're just like, no, that's actually a little offensive. It's like I think it like you're almost putting on an air if you just like let it pass, and it's not that I'm saying to like completely let it pass, but like my general reaction to things like that is like I just have a very straight face. Like I'm just like completely silent, stare at them, let them sit in that for a while, and go like, oh fuck, I said something wrong. And like and then it's like, you realize you did that, cool, now let's continue on to the business at hand, because I'm a professional. I don't know what you are right now, but I think like it is really challenging to like navigate that, and like I said, I don't want to diminish it. I don't think I'm the best person to be speaking on it. Like I know plenty of women founders and investors and just general women who deal with all of this stuff like on a regular basis. And like, I know for me, it's like almost a little bit easier because I'm kind of oblivious, or maybe slightly overly confident, like a lot of men. But like, I think there's an aspect of like, I'm not going to take people's shit, and I'm going to say what I mean, and I'm going to be honest about it. And if that's something that bothers you and doesn't come across as like, okay, like we can either have a conversation about it or not. And that's just fit. Like, yeah, then it's not a fit, and that's okay too. Like I'm willing to toss that opportunity because it wasn't for me, And like I said, I don't want to diminish it, because I know people experience different things. You maybe have to have that job, and now you're dealing with a boss that like isn't like being good to you, but you can't just like get up and leave and quit, like you're not in a position to do that. You don't have the power to do that. And like, so I deeply respect the people who are like just taking it on the chin and like continuing to navigate that, even though they're suffering. But at the same time, I think it's if you can navigate it by like holding that strength within yourself and not empowering that behavior, and just starting to like, and like cut that out. Like speak for yourself, speak up, because it may piss some people off, but other people, they're gonna respect it, and even the people that you piss off sometimes will end up respecting it anyway, because they're like, wow, she told me off. I was pissed off about it, but she still did a fucking amazing job.
Totally.
So now what?
I think for me too, it's like noticing when it's happening and figuring out, what is a balance, like waiting to hear what they're saying and pausing, because sometimes I'll just skip through it not knowing whether or not my reaction is valid or not, right? And thinking that I have to be nice. But if you give yourself that moment of pause, it gives a moment of clarity to figure out, wait, that's actually really inappropriate. And, I'll pause here and actually have some sort of way to make sure they know that it's not okay. Because sometimes it doesn't register. So waiting, and as you're in these conversations as a woman, really making sure you're hearing when this happens. And like, I've blundered and felt like I've had to prove myself. But I think the more you try to listen when it shows up, the more prepared you can be to actually take that pause and give that feedback back to them, or say something to stand up for yourself.
Yeah. And I think to that point too, it's like that, I guess like that's my tactic of like, I just like,
Totally. I'm
very quick to just stop responding and be like,
yeah,
did you, like, what was that? Like, that's not funny if that's what you thought it was. Like, and I'm not even saying any of that. I think my facial expressions tell it all. It's
does
like, it's just like that's it. And yeah, but it is really tough. So like, yeah, I think it involves having a level of confidence that what value you bring to the table, and not letting that get overshadowed by like someone who is just saying something stupid or not respecting you or whatever have you.
Totally. So. Well, I've taken up a lot of your time. I really appreciate it. Naji is amazing at what he does, and he's also a dear friend, and I'm really grateful for you. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.